take Buxton. And Mike Elias and that group took Carlos Correa. And Correa ended up being the better player.
He was pretty good.
Over the time period, he was the better player between the two. Buxton has more tools, but Correa's the better player, and he's the one with the World Championship ring. So I kind of feel like you're not going to go wrong either way, to be honest. It really depends on, who you feel better about. I mean, I like Jones's overall package more, and I would take Jones. But I got to tell you, Holiday, to me, is a can't-miss bat. So I won't be surprised if the Orioles go either way.
Jim, I'm assuming the Jones kid is very similar to the player his dad was. How about Holiday? Is he sort of a left-handed version of Matt?
A better defensive player. He's a shortstop, so I'd say better defender. But yeah, the bat to me is similar. It's a really good stroke, and he can hit high velocity, stays back well on breaking balls and change-ups, and I mean the bat's going to play. I mean I don't think there's any doubt he's going to hit. He's going to have power, and more importantly, he's going to be a winning player, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he's one of those guys where whatever tools he doesn't have, he's going to have that Derek Jeter kind of leadership swag that certainly will make up for anything else. I mean, I think both guys are can't-miss guys, and I don't think you could go wrong either direction you decided to go.
And of course, there is always the risk, Jim, when we talk about the Orioles in the draft, that they want to cut a deal and they want to do something else, or they want to take specifically a college bat because that's what they've done with Mike Elias. Would it be a mistake to go that route this year? Is the difference between the top guys, the Jones, the Holidays, and, say, a Brooks Lee from Cal Poly or Jacob Berry, so significant that it would be a mistake for them to uniquely do that this year?
Yeah, I think it's a mistake. Other people will not say that, but you're asking my opinion. So, yeah, I'm on your show, and clearly, to me, you take one of those two guys. Otherwise, I'm gonna rip you. And the thing that's great about a draft or having this conversation is we all get to look back, 5 or 7 years later, whatever it is, to remind people what you could have done and what you didn't do and what you should have done. We always do that in every single draft, and certainly I went through more scouting directors than George Steinbrenner went through managers because I just couldn't stand the mistakes. And we'd always look back and go, man, we could have had this guy or that guy, and we did this, and why did we do that? But when you're picking at the very top and you've got guys like Jones and Holiday that check all the boxes they check, I don't think that's the time to go off script.
So what is Brooks Lee then? Like, what how does he measure to those guys?
Oh, I don't think there's any question. Look, any of those guys in the top 10, and I wrote about this in The Athletic, I think there's 10 really good position players that could go 1 to 10. There'll be a pitcher mixed in or not. I just think the difference is when you walk onto a field and you see the Harpers, the Machados, the Trouts, the Acuñas, the Tatises, when you see that level player, that's kind of the expectation is who's got the ceiling to be the absolute superstar. And there's a difference between a superstar and an all-star. So maybe I'll take Lee as an all-star and these other guys as a superstar.
That's fair. Jim Bowden from The Athletic and SiriusXM, CBS Sports HQ with us here on GCR.
Hey, Jim, I want to ask you about two guys that Mike Elias has taken over the past few years. One of them is young Gunnar Henderson, who's just 20 right now and has just gotten the promotion up to AAA. And the other is a guy I saw that he drafted, paid over slot, was Kobe Mayo. Saw him a couple weeks ago and hitting a home run that was like a Mark McGwire type of home run. Could you talk a little bit about those two players?
I can talk about Henderson. I can't talk about the other guy because I haven't seen him in a couple years. But I do like Henderson because of the hit tool, right?
Yeah.
The kid's going to hit.
Yeah.
And the one thing that I've always told people, the one thing that I learned the hard way during my years is when you hit, you play, and everything else will work out. But you got to have the hit tool. I don't mean the power tool, the steel tool, or you got to be able to hit. And when I cover teams every October, when I'm covering all these World Series teams and playoff teams, the tools that matter the most to a player that I'm covering in World Series for position players is the hit tool 1 and the field tool. If you hit and you field, you got a chance to win championships because the glove will help the pitching staff win in run prevention. And if you can hit, well, the power can come or the speed can come and become usable. And you look at a guy like Henderson, I would be shocked, stunned if he's not a 300 hitter in the big league.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Absolutely stunned. And the power's going to come too. It is. He's going to have 20 home run power in the big leagues or more, and he can steal bags. And so, he is my kind of player. I think he was a second-round pick like 3 years ago, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
But I love his left-handed bat. He's one
Reminds
of those
you?
guys, I get goosebumps when I see him, to be honest.
Does he remind you of a Chipper Jones type of player? Ultimately.
I can't go that far.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Chipper's so special to me
Yeah.
that when I see a guy like that, I never compare someone, to that because Chipper was Chipper. But I see this kid as a guy that can win a batting title. I see this kid as a guy that can hit 20 to 25 home runs, and there's no risk with this guy.
Yeah.
This guy's going to hit. He's going to play. He's going to be a really good player for a long time. So those are the kind of players that I like. I don't like risk, right? I like to be able to walk into a ballpark and know he's going to hit.
Yeah, I can count on it. Sure.
You're going to play. So I can't talk about the other guy. I haven't seen him, but I've seen a lot of Henderson.
Jim, I remember reading a couple weeks ago at The Athletic about how excited you were to see the Orioles now with Rutschman and Rodriguez on the way. And, of course, unfortunately not going to be the case with Rodriguez, at least for a little while. And it's been a bit of a struggle for Rutschman. And I'm not trying to – look, it's very young in his career. There's plenty of time. But I do think it's worthy of having a conversation about what our expectations are for Adley Rutschman and whether maybe we had gotten a bit carried away in Baltimore where once again, much like Matt Wieters years before him, we had anointed someone as, some amalgamation of Mike Piazza and Pudge Rodriguez. And was it ever fair to treat any catcher as someone that could be an offensive centerpiece for your franchise for the next decade?
He will be. And so he will live up to all the expectations you're talking about. He won't be Wieters. He will, in 3 years, be the best catcher in our sport all around, offensively, the whole package. He's that good. Now, the one thing I'll remind people, and that people don't understand, Mike Trout hit 220 his first year in the big leagues. Ken Griffey, Barry Bonds hit 220 first year in the big leagues. People forget that. There is a big difference for rookies in 2022 than there was 5 years ago or 10 years ago. Because 5 years ago, 10 years ago, when a rookie came to the big leagues, we didn't know really how to pitch to him outside of what a minor league manager might have told us. And so we had to learn. So a lot of times rookies had great years, and then we were figuring out how to pitch to them. Then they would have what they call a sophomore jinx, they used to call it back then, where the guy's second year he'd struggle because people learned how to pitch to him, and then the third year he'd figure it out again or not. But now what happens in 2022 when you get to the big leagues, we've seen all your at-bats. There's no secrets anymore. I know exactly how to pitch to you. And I got pitchers at this level, at the big league level, that you've never seen before. And I got pitchers that can execute pitches they couldn't execute in a AA and AAA. I got the best of the best here, and that's what you're facing, and I know your holes, and I'm going to expose you, and now you got to adjust. So you get your sophomore jinx year and your rookie year. I mean, look at Bobby Witt struggle the first month of the season. Look at Spencer Torkelson struggles in Detroit. I mean, Jared Kelenic is still struggling in his second year. It's tougher to be a rookie now than ever before because we're all prepared for you. There are no secrets. I don't have to learn about you. I've watched you since high school. I've watched every pitch that's been thrown at you in the minor leagues. I have video of it. So I know exactly how I'm going to beat you. So that's hard. And then for a young kid with those expectations, you think you're going to walk here and just do what you've done your whole life? You've never failed in your life. You were the best in Little League, the best in junior high, the best in high school, the best in college, the best in the minor leagues, and then you walk here. And you don't know what failure means. You never. So then you got to deal with all that stuff. And then you're dealing with the private jets, and you're dealing with the hotel suites and all the fans and all the expectations, and you got to deal with all that stuff. And, oh, by the way, you have money for the first time for a lot of these guys. So I'm making every excuse I can for Adley, and rightfully so. I can promise you in 3 years that all the expectations that Orioles fans have for this kid is going to play out. I promise you that.
All right, we'll be patient.
I've got a question coming from a Baltimore angle, Jim. It looks like Mike Elias has really gotten the pipeline in line now, and it's starting to be, you turn it on and there's going to be prospects. But other than Grayson Rodriguez and D.L. Hall and Kyle Bradish, there's not a lot of pitching in this organization. I'm wondering if you see this year, mid-season, Mancini and or Santander being able to be dealt to bring some type of near-ready prospect arms to the Orioles, because I don't know where the pitching's going to come from.
Yeah, it's going to come from trades or it's going to come from free agency. And all you got to do is, the teams that are able to draft and develop them themselves are few and far between. The Giants were able to do it back with Lincecum, Bumgarner, and Kane. But for the most part, when the Cubs won, they went out and traded or bought the pitching.
Mm-hmm.
That's the most operandi. So the whole reason that Mike Elias took the wall and moved it so far out of left field and so high that every team is pissed is because he wants free agent pitchers to come to Camden Yards. And no free agent pitchers wanted to come to Camden Yards, just like they don't want to go to Coors Field. They don't want to sign in Baltimore. They don't want your money because that ballpark is too small and fly balls are home runs. So now you've made it so that you've got dimensions that if you're a pitcher, I'll go to Camden Yards now.
Mm-hmm.
You've given me an incentive to go there, and you're going to have some money to spend, hopefully Mr. Angelo's family. I don't think there's any doubt if you trade Santander and or Mancini, you need pitching. Just keep trading for the pitching and load up on the pitching. But also you got to go to free agency and get some that way too.
Do you think?
I think this is the off season. They got to spend some money. I thought last off season they'd go spend for one guy and try to do at least one guy a year, which they didn't do last year, which I thought they should have. But they have to start doing it this year, because you don't want all the kids to arrive and then you don't have enough to win right away.
I could be proved wrong, Jim, but I hear that they don't quite, John doesn't quite have access to the checkbook, the family checkbook. And unless there were details on how the succession plan, I understand that could take a while.
Yeah, no, I've heard the same thing. I've heard that there's a lot of complications, and there's really... a lot of complications with health and a lot of complications with what you can and can't do for a period of time until certain things happen. I understand that. And you've got the lawsuit that's out there. You got the Masson situation. It's complicated. I get it.
Yeah.
But let me say this. There's enough revenue in the industry, and you have enough non-arbitration eligible players coming that there is money.
Okay.
That you can go out in free agency and add a piece or two this winter.
All right.
There's absolutely a pathway to do that. And that's what has to happen.
Before Glenn finishes up with you, I got to ask you one question. I didn't know Dan Duquette when he came to Baltimore, and I had reason actually not to like Dan. But over time, I really appreciated the work that he did here, given that he sort of had to go into combat with one hand tied behind his back. On the international side of things. And he also didn't have full say-so in baseball decisions. Your opinion of the job that Dan did, and whether you think he'd be worthy of somebody hiring him again?
Yeah, I definitely think so. I think the one thing that any older person, if they want to get back being a GM or a manager, has to understand is how much the game has changed. And if you don't keep up with how it's changed, it's going to be tough to compete.
Yeah.
Because when you have organizations like the Dodgers and the Astros and Tampa Bay, the Mets now, that are so far advanced in technology, analytics, information, preparation, ability to tweak players' swings, and mechanics. We've never seen this before in the history of baseball, how far advanced it is.
Yeah.
If you can't embrace that with your staff, then it's not going to work. In Dan's last days in Baltimore, he had too much of the group that he had that was in Boston and Montreal and his previous stops.
Yeah.
There wasn't enough of today's mindset around him to help him, besides being restricted in what he could do internationally. Dan's a really good baseball guy. The only thing, I would say is you have to make sure your front office around you is competitive with the best in the sport, because it's going to be tough to win if you're not.
Jim, I know we need to let you go, and I've kept you long. If I could just squeeze in quickly to revisit Mancini for a second. It's a sensitive thing, and I'm sure you understand that here in Baltimore. And you're never going to be able to recoup, full value, right? Because this is Trey Mancini that we're talking about. He's Mr. Oriole at this point. Not to compare him to Brooks Robinson, but you know what I mean.
Yes.
What can you do? Can you do well enough in a Mancini trade that the fan base wouldn't be furious about it at the end? This is a player, for as good of a season he's having, he's positionless, right? Like most teams think they have a Trey Mancini on their roster somewhere. Can you do well enough to not make this become a pitchfork situation with this fan base if you trade Trey Mancini?
No, it's going to be pitchfork when it happens. Let me tell you what the fans want. They want to win, okay? So they'll forgive you in 2 years when you're winning. So win. You got to win. That's it. You're building this thing. You don't have to spend all this money to win. Look at Tampa Bay. But you're getting close enough that in the next 2 years – when I'm back on your show in 2 years, we better be talking about the Orioles being in contention right now.
No doubt. Yeah, I hear you.
And then they're going to be okay. They're going to look back and say, we understand. We didn't like it. We wish Trey could have finished his career here. We're going to hear all that, right? But at the end of the day, that's what they want. So just make sure you deliver that. Players come and go. I'm sorry to say that. Whether you're a superstar, a star, a good player, a fan favorite, a hated player, they're all going to come and go. Every single one of them is going to come and go. None of them are there. They all have an expiration date. Everybody. Everyone will get over it in time. Just win. When you win, it solves everything.
He is Jim Bowden, at Jim Bowden GM on Twitter.
Can I say one thing, Jim? You talked about Dan Duquette needing to, grow up and with the analytics and have the people around him. I got to tell you that one of the things I appreciate about you so much is you didn't have your nose in the air about fantasy sports. That when your career changed, you have fully embraced, your work with the Fantasy Alarm and everything. But there's a lot of people in your position that would have really thumbed their noses at fantasy. And I think you were very smart to do it, and it just shows a really neat side of you, Jim.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And I will say this about fantasy. One of the things that was always fun in clubhouses is how much the players are into fantasy football. Every single club.
Jack
every
Peterson.
Single player. I mean, it's incredible. It really is. It is huge. And we had a nice little Tommy Pham, Jack Peterson moment last week over it. But this is huge.
Yeah.
And the number of reality GMs that are in leagues together for football, they don't want it to be public, and we understand why, because people don't have. But it's also important to understand the difference between reality and fantasy, and it allows a lot more people to get involved and love baseball even more.
I agree.
When you follow players at this level. So I love baseball, period. I love it at every level, and whether it be reality, fantasy, or betting, which is now obviously big in the sport. I think it's all great and all fun to follow.
The Athletic, SiriusXM, and of course CBS Sports HQ.
He's the best.
Jim Bowden, thank you so much.
Thank
so
you,
giving
Jim.
of your time today. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.